Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The mirror reflected an image that didn't quite match reality. Elisha stood before it, adjusting the golden tiara atop his head and smoothing down the iconic red, white, and blue costume. He'd spent months perfecting every detail of his Wonder Woman cosplay for Comic-Con, from the intricately braided dark wig to the hand-stitched boots. As he fastened the lasso of truth to his hip, Elisha felt a thrill of excitement. There was something oddly freeing about transforming into the Amazonian warrior princess. He struck a powerful pose, hands on his hips, and couldn't help but smile at his reflection. For years, Wonder Woman had been his hero, her strength, compassion, and courage inspiring him through difficult times. Now, he'd finally have the chance to embody those qualities himself.
"You can do this,"
Elisha whispered, giving himself a final once-over. He grabbed his convention pass and headed out the door of his small apartment. The subway ride to the convention center was nerve-wracking. Elisha kept his head down, hyper-aware of the stares and whispers from other passengers. But as he neared his destination, he noticed more and more costumed attendees boarding the train. A towering Darth Vader nodded in approval as he entered. Two teenage girls dressed as anime characters complimented Elisha's costume enthusiastically. By the time he arrived at Comic-Con, Elisha's anxiety had transformed into giddy excitement. He joined the sea of colorful characters flooding into the massive convention hall. Superheroes mingled with villains. Video game avatars posed for photos with cartoon mascots. It was sensory overload in the best possible way. "Wonder Woman, can we get a picture?" Elisha turned to see a family decked out in Justice League gear, waving him over. The parents wore Superman and Batman t-shirts, while their young daughter sported an adorable Supergirl costume. He hesitated for just a moment before striking his best Wonder Woman pose beside them. "You look amazing!" the mother gushed as she snapped several photos. "Did you make the costume yourself?" Elisha nodded, a bit overwhelmed by the attention. "Yes, I did. Took about 6 months to get all the details right."
"Well, it certainly paid off," the father chimed in. "Best Wonder Woman cosplay I've seen today by far."
As the family moved on, Elisha felt a warm glow of pride. He'd been so nervous about how people would react, but everyone had been incredibly kind and supportive so far. Maybe this day wouldn't be so bad after all. The convention was a whirlwind of panels, autograph signings, and exploring the sprawling vendor hall. Elisha found himself swept up in the excitement, posing for countless photos and chatting with fellow Wonder Woman fans about their shared love for the character. During a quieter moment, he wandered into a smaller panel room where a group of cosplayers were discussing the art of crossplay, dressing as characters of a different gender. Elisha slipped into a seat in the back, listening intently as the panelists shared their experiences. "For me, crossplay isn't just about the costume," one speaker explained. "It's a way to explore different facets of myself, to step outside societal expectations and just be free to express myself however I want." Those words struck a chord deep within Elisha. He'd always assumed his fascination with Wonder Woman was purely about admiring her as a hero. But sitting there, surrounded by others who found joy and meaning in gender-bending cosplay, he began to see his own motivations in a new light. As the day wore on, Elisha found himself less focused on mimicking Wonder Woman's mannerisms and more on simply existing comfortably in the costume. The wig no longer felt strange against his neck. The corset didn't pinch quite so much. With each compliment and photo request, he stood a little taller, smiled a little brighter. It wasn't until he was riding the subway home, convention badge tucked safely in his bag, that the full impact of the day hit him. Elisha caught his reflection in the darkened train window, smudged makeup, wig slightly askew, but still unmistakably Wonder Woman. And for the first time, he truly saw himself in that reflection. The weeks following Comic-Con were a roller coaster of emotions for Elisha. He found himself constantly reliving moments from that day, poring over photos and replaying conversations in his mind. The costume hung in his closet, a tangible reminder of the freedom and joy he'd experienced. At first, Elisha tried to push those feelings aside. He threw himself into work, picking up extra shifts at the bookstore and volunteering for every mind-numbing task he could find. But even as he restocked shelves and processed returns, his thoughts kept drifting back to the exhilaration of being Wonder Woman. It was during a particularly slow afternoon shift that Elisha found himself wandering into the store's small graphic novel section. His fingers trailed along the spines until they landed on a collected volume of classic Wonder Woman comics. He pulled it from the shelf, flipping through the colorful pages with a wistful smile.
You a big fan?
Elisha startled at the voice, nearly dropping the book. He looked up to see his coworker, Mia, watching him with curiosity.
Oh, yeah,
he stammered, quickly shelving the comic. Just, appreciating the artwork. Mia raised an eyebrow.
Uh-huh.
That wouldn't have anything to do with your amazing Wonder Woman cosplay from Comic-Con, would it? Elisha felt his face flush.
You saw that?
Are you kidding? Your photos were all over Instagram. Mia grinned. I had no idea you were so into cosplay. You looked incredible.
Thanks,
Elisha mumbled, unsure how to process this information. He'd been so careful to keep his convention adventures separate from his everyday life. But now that the barrier had been breached, he found himself wanting to open up.
It was my first time, actually,
he admitted.
Cosplaying, I mean. I've always loved Wonder Woman, but I never thought I could actually dress up as her.
Mia's expression softened. Well, I'm glad you did. You really captured her spirit. She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. There's a local cosplay group that meets up sometimes. They do photo shoots, work on costumes together, that kind of thing. I could put you in touch with them if you're interested. Elisha hesitated. Part of him wanted nothing more than to dive deeper into this new world he'd discovered, but another part was terrified of what that might mean.
I'll think about it,
he said finally.
Thanks, Mia.
As the days passed, Elisha found himself unable to stop thinking about Mia's offer. He spent hours online, researching local cosplay communities and marveling at the incredible costumes people created. The more he explored, the more he realized that his experience at Comic-Con hadn't been a fluke. There was a whole world of people who found joy and self-expression through costume play. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks of internal debate, Elisha worked up the courage to ask Mia for more information about the cosplay group. She was thrilled, immediately sending him links to their social media pages and upcoming events. There's a small meetup this weekend at the park, Mia explained during their next shared shift. Nothing fancy, just a chance for people to hang out and talk cosplay. You should come. I'll be there too, so you'll know at least one person. Elisha agreed, albeit nervously. When Saturday rolled around, he found himself standing at the edge of the park, scanning the gathered group for familiar faces. He spotted Mia chatting with a tall man wearing an elaborate steampunk outfit. She waved him over enthusiastically. Everyone, "This is Elisha," Mia announced as he approached. "He did an amazing Wonder Woman cosplay at Comic-Con." The group welcomed him warmly, peppering him with questions about his costume and how long he'd been cosplaying. Elisha found himself relaxing as he talked about the process of creating his Wonder Woman outfit. These people understood the passion and dedication that went into bringing a character to life. As the afternoon wore on, Elisha learned about upcoming conventions and costume contests. He marveled at photos of intricate armor and gravity-defying wigs. But most importantly, he began to see cosplay as more than just playing dress-up. It was an art form, a means of self-expression, and a way to connect with others who shared that passion. "So, what's your next cosplay going to be?" someone asked as the meetup was winding down. Elisha paused, considering. He'd been so focused on reliving his Wonder Woman experience that he hadn't really thought about future costumes. But now, surrounded by the creativity and enthusiasm of his new friends, possibilities began to spark in his mind. "I'm not sure yet," he said slowly, "but I think I might want to try something different. Maybe explore some other female characters I've always admired." The group responded with encouraging suggestions and offers to help with whatever he decided. As Elisha headed home that evening, he felt a sense of belonging he'd never experienced before. For the first time in his life, he'd found a community where he could truly be himself, whatever form that might take. Over the next few months, Elisha threw himself into the world of cosplay with newfound enthusiasm. He joined online forums, watched countless makeup tutorials, and spent every spare moment working on new costumes. His tiny apartment slowly filled with wigs, fabric scraps, and half-finished props. His next convention arrived faster than he'd anticipated. This time, Elisha arrived dressed as Sailor Moon, the iconic magical girl anime character. The blonde, pigtails, and short skirt felt even more daring than Wonder Woman had, but the rush of excitement was the same. As he posed for photos and chatted with fellow anime fans, Elisha felt a sense of freedom he'd never known before. In this costume, in this space, he could be anyone he wanted to be. The lines between masculinity and femininity blurred, leaving only self-expression and joy. But as much as Elisha loved the convention experience, he found himself wanting to explore this new side of himself in quieter, more personal ways. He began experimenting with makeup at home, teaching himself to contour and highlight until his features softened into a more feminine appearance. He ordered breast forms and hip pads, marveling at how they transformed his silhouette. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Elisha decided to take a bold step. He carefully applied his makeup, pulled on a flowy sundress he'd bought on a whim, and styled a long auburn wig. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of his apartment and walked to a nearby coffee shop. His heart raced as he ordered his drink, hyper-aware of every glance in his direction. But as the minutes ticked by and the world didn't come crashing down, Elisha began to relax. He sipped his latte, flipped through a magazine, and simply existed in this new form. As he was leaving the cafe, an elderly woman stopped him with a gentle touch on the arm. "I just wanted to say, dear, that dress is lovely on you. The color really brings out your eyes." Elisha felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes.
"Thank you,"
he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot." The woman smiled kindly and continued on her way, leaving Elisha to ponder the unexpected impact of that simple interaction. It wasn't just the compliment itself, but the easy acceptance behind it. In that moment, he'd been seen and appreciated for exactly who he was. These small outings became a regular part of Elisha's life. He'd dress up and run errands, go window shopping, or simply take a walk in the park. Each time, he grew more comfortable in his feminine presentation. The stares and whispers that had once terrified him now barely registered. Of course, not every experience was positive. There were still moments of discomfort, confused looks, and the occasional rude comment. But Elisha found that the joy and sense of authenticity he felt far outweighed any negativity he encountered. As his confidence grew, Elisha began to open up to the people in his life about this aspect of himself. He started small, confiding in Mia over coffee one afternoon after their shift. Her immediate acceptance and excitement gave him the courage to have more difficult conversations. Telling his parents was nerve-wracking, but ultimately rewarding. While they didn't fully understand at first, they listened with open minds and assured Elisha of their love and support. His father even asked to see photos of his costumes, marveling at the craftsmanship involved. Not all of Elisha's friends were as accepting. He lost touch with a few people who couldn't seem to wrap their heads around his evolving gender expression. But for every person who drifted away, Elisha found his chosen family within the cosplay and cross-dressing communities growing stronger. As the months passed, Elisha's exploration of femininity began to extend beyond just cosplay and occasional outings. He found himself incorporating more traditionally feminine elements into his everyday wardrobe, a flowy top here, a pair of women's jeans there. His long hair, once kept tied back in a ponytail, now fell in soft waves around his face. These changes didn't go unnoticed at work. While most of his coworkers were supportive or simply didn't comment, Elisha could feel the tension from his manager, Mr. Bradshaw. The older man's disapproving glances and clipped tone made it clear he wasn't comfortable with Elisha's evolving appearance. Things came to a head one busy Saturday afternoon. Elisha was restocking the fantasy section, his nails painted a shimmery blue that matched his flowing peasant top. Mr. Bradshaw approached, his face set in a stern expression.
"Elisha, I need to speak with you in my office," he said, his voice low but firm.
Elisha's stomach dropped, but he nodded and followed his manager to the small room at the back of the store. Mr. Bradshaw closed the door behind them and turned to face Elisha with a heavy sigh.
"Look, I've tried to be patient," he began, "but I'm concerned about the image you're presenting to our customers. This is a family bookstore, and your appearance might make some people uncomfortable."
Elisha felt a flash of anger, quickly followed by a wave of sadness. He'd known this conversation was coming, but it still hurt to hear.
"I'm not sure I understand,"
Elisha said carefully.
"My work hasn't suffered. In fact, my sales numbers are higher than ever."
Mr. Bradshaw shifted uncomfortably. "It's not about your performance. It's about maintaining a certain professional standard. I'm going to have to ask you to tone things down. No more painted nails, no jewelry, and please stick to men's clothing while you're on the clock." Elisha took a deep breath, weighing his options. He could comply, forcing himself back into a box that no longer fit, or he could stand his ground and risk losing his job. In that moment, he thought of Wonder Woman, her unwavering courage in the face of injustice.
"I'm sorry, Mr. Bradshaw, but I can't do that,"
Elisha said, his voice steady despite his racing heart.
"My appearance isn't hurting anyone. It's not inappropriate or unprofessional. It's simply me being authentic. If that's a problem for the store, then perhaps this isn't the right place for me anymore."
Mr. Bradshaw's eyes widened, clearly not expecting this response.
"Are you saying you'd rather quit than follow the dress code?"
Elisha nodded slowly.
"If it comes to that, yes. I've spent too long hiding who I am. I won't do it anymore. Not even for this job.
There was a long, tense silence. Finally, Mr. Bradshaw sighed heavily.
I don't want to lose you as an employee, Elisha. You're one of our best. Let me talk to the district manager. See if we can find a compromise.
It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As Elisha left the office, he felt a mix of anxiety and pride. Standing up for himself hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Whatever the outcome, he knew he'd made the right choice. In the weeks that followed, Elisha was surprised to find an outpouring of support from his coworkers and even some regular customers who'd noticed the tension with Mr. Bradshaw. Mia organized a petition backing Elisha's right to self-expression, gathering signatures from staff and patrons alike. To everyone's relief, the district manager turned out to be far more progressive than Mr. Bradshaw. After reviewing the situation, she not only allowed Elisha to continue dressing as he chose, but also implemented diversity training for all employees. Mr. Bradshaw's discomfort didn't disappear overnight, but he made a visible effort to be more accepting. This victory at work gave Elisha the confidence to take even bigger steps in his personal life. He began attending support groups for gender non-conforming individuals, finding comfort and guidance in the stories of others on similar journeys. Through these meetings, he started to explore the complexities of gender identity beyond just clothing and presentation. As Elisha's understanding of himself grew, so did his desire to share that understanding with the world. He started a blog documenting his experiences with cosplay and crossdressing, offering advice and encouragement to others, questioning their gender expression. To his surprise, the blog quickly gained a following, with readers from around the world reaching out to thank him for his honesty and insight. One particularly memorable message came from a teenager named Chris. The young person wrote about feeling trapped between societal expectations and their true self, much as Elisha had once felt. Chris had stumbled upon Elisha's blog while researching Wonder Woman costumes and found hope in his story. Elisha spent hours crafting a thoughtful response, sharing resources and offering words of encouragement. He thought back to his own journey, how a single day at Comic-Con had set him on this path of self-discovery. If he could provide that same catalyst for someone else, it would all be worth it. As Elisha hit send on his reply to Chris, he glanced up at the Wonder Woman poster hanging above his desk. He smiled, remembering the nervousness and excitement of that first cosplay experience. So much had changed since then, but the core of who he was, the strength, compassion, and courage he'd always admired in his hero, remained the same. Elisha's journey was far from over. There would be more challenges to face, more self-discovery ahead. But as he sat there, surrounded by the trappings of both his masculine and feminine sides, he felt a sense of peace. He was no longer hiding, no longer afraid to be seen. Like Wonder Woman herself, he had found the power that comes from embracing every facet of who you are. With renewed purpose, Elisha turned back to his computer. He had a new blog post to write, a story of transformation to share. And somewhere out there, someone like Chris, or like the person he used to be, needed to hear it. As his fingers flew across the keyboard, Elisha felt a familiar thrill of excitement. He was creating something new, not just in words, but in himself. With each passing day, each small act of bravery, he was becoming more and more the person he was always meant to be. The journey ahead might not be easy, but Elisha was ready to face it head on. After all, he had the spirit of an Amazonian warrior princess to guide him, and in the end, that was all the strength he needed.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!